Josh and Nath, welcome. Combat Lab.
Welcome. Sound like Mike Tyson.
I do actually. We turned on some good weather for you. We got Dallas also sitting in the corner, breathing heavily after a sweat sesh. How are you boys?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Beautiful setup.
Thanks, boys. It's the first time I've met you, so I'm really interested to hear your story. And you guys look in crazy shape. You've got that Australia, patch on the back of your gis. Tell us what you're all about.
Yeah, so me and Josh pretty much just grew up in a judo family. Mum went to the Olympics in Seoul 1988 for judo as well.
Whoa.
Dad was her Olympic coach, so I guess naturally we were going to be involved in judo. Like, we grew up crawling alongside the edge of the mat, just like watching the national team and that sort of thing. We've always been involved. But I guess similar to most kids, like in sporting families and active families, we played footy and soccer and tennis and just whatever we could get involved with when we were kids. But I think from a pretty young age, like, judo was what we were better at, but we sort of kept doing everything till, I think for me, I was 13 or 14 when I just started, I think 14 when I just started doing judo, because it's sort of that age where you can be decent at a lot of stuff or really good at one thing. And I think judo was the thing I was probably best at, but I was definitely most passionate about. Like, if I lost a game of footy or tennis, I'd be pissed off, but I'd be all right. Like, I'd get over it. But if I lost a fight in judo, I'd be gutted for ages and I'd throw a tantrum or whatever. So, and then from about 14, 15, started being more serious. And, from a pretty young age, I wanted to get to the Olympics and to win Olympic medal. So, yeah.
I was 15 when I was playing soccer until I was 15. And then I think it was just like the team sport, individual sport, judo. It's just like, it's all you're training. If you win, you lose. Like, you fight well, you fight bad. Like, it's all up to you.
Yep.
And soccer, I never felt like it was up to me. Like, if I played really well, the team lost. Like, I was gutted. And then if I played really bad, the team won. Like, I didn't feel like I'd done anything good. So in the end, I think I knew that I was going to be better at judo, and that was like a big factor as well, that I could, if I was going to work harder in judo, then I was going to be able to get the good results.
Sick. And the age gap between you guys is 3 or 2 years?
Yeah, 3 years.
3 years.
25, 22.
Yeah, sweet. What's it like having a training partner consistently? That's your brother.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome now. Like, when we were younger, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, can't imagine.
Especially the younger one. And I was really small. I didn't have my growth spurt until I was like, I'm pretty small now, but I didn't grow really until I was like 14. So we were always, there was too much age and weight gap for us to ever train together.
Yeah, hadn't grown into your man strength yet.
I'm still growing a little bit, but I think when I was about 17, 18, when I moved up into the weight division I'm in now, so there was only one weight gap between us, then it could be a little bit more.
And that's
realistic.
60 and 66,
Yeah,
is that
60,
right?
I fight 66 kilos, Josh 60. But yeah, I don't think we really did almost any judo. Like, we played around stuff at home. That was probably the extent of it.
Yeah.
Till he was about 15, 16, because there was just a size gap, and the age is a bit more of a bigger deal at that sort of age when he's still like a kid.
Yeah.
But then, like, now it's probably the only thing it's probably the biggest contributing factor to our level now, that we've got that body.
Yeah, man.
Because it's tough for a sport like judo in Australia. There's not the number of bodies that you need compared to Europe and Asia or Eastern Bloc. So we're really fortunate that we've got each other to push.
It's helpful during quarantine as well, when you've got one person to train with,
Very
just trying
true.
to fight
Your
your
main
parents.
training partner.
Nice.
So tell us sort of how far you went in the sport so far, and then give people the picture of sort of your achievements to date.
Yeah, I think we're both pretty successful juniors. Like, I think I won my first nationals at about 11. I think 11. And then I think at about 15, I won the under 17. I was probably the age where I sort of knew that I could be pretty good. At 15, I won the under 17 nationals, and I made the final of the under 21 nationals. And the next day, a few weeks before, I had a really small tear in my knee, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to fight at the nationals. And Dad and Mum just sort of like got me through that period injured, and sort of didn't put any pressure on whether or not I'd fight, and just up to me. And I just was like, I knew I was fighting straight away, but I got through and fought. And then the next day, I had to re-weigh in again that night. So I had, I think, 9 fights that day. 1 under 17s, made the final of under 21. Went back to the sauna, and I think I had about 2.5 kilos to sweat off to then make weight that night to fight again the next day.
Bro.
And I remember I made the weight, and Dad was just sitting with me in the sauna, and he's like, it's all right, like, tomorrow, one more day, like, and it'll be a good crack for you. I had a decent draw, and he's like, you can see what you can do at this stage, like at seniors. And I think got back, like finished making weight. And when you're a kid, you don't know what you're doing with weight and stuff like that. I think I nailed a pizza or something straight after weight. Like probably the worst thing could have possibly done.
Chocolate milk. And
And then the next morning I woke up and as you can imagine, after you've had 9 or 10 fights the day before, I thought I'd been hit by a truck.
Yeah.
And but I had a good day and I made the final of the senior nationals that year. And the only boy that beat me had just come back from London from the Olympics. So I was like, all right, like maybe I didn't think London was really realistic. I think I was 17 or something. So it wasn't really a possibility, but not everyone can go to the Olympics at 18 like Josh. But that was sort of the age when I was like, all right, like I can sort of do this and progress. And as soon as I finished school, I moved pretty much to England and just started doing judo full time.
Did you guys go together?
Well, he was still at school at the
still at
time.
school,
okay. Yep,
So I went with a good mate of mine who qualified for Rio, Jake, in the weight above me.
Yep.
We went, I think, for 3 or 4 months, like over Christmas. Most people went to schoolies and I ended up in snowing England, some little shed training full time. But no, it was good. And I wouldn't, like some of those moments in a house with 10 or 12 boys training full time were pretty wild and they were good times. But, and then pretty much that whole 4-year period was just trying to qualify for Rio. And we didn't really know if that was going to be possible for Josh because he was just so young. But then he had some pretty unreal results just the year. He pretty much qualified in 4 months.
Yeah, wow.
So it took me 18 months and took Josh about 6.
Wow.
Then to get to experience qualifying for Rio together and going to the Olympics together was unreal. Yeah.
Josh, can I ask, do you have like this internal thing where you're just like, I need to fucking beat this. I need to beat my brother.
Just got to one up every time. I mean, I think it's always there. Like it's never your actual motivation.
Yeah.
But I think having somebody that's always like one step ahead every time, because you can never catch your older brother. Like that's the sort of thing that you're always trying to chase him, but you can never actually catch him.
Yeah.
Especially when he's bigger and he's older. Like you're always trying to get there.
We're getting some gems on this.
Yeah,
here.
man. I think that's the key to everything though. It's like if you see something is possible, then it like
someone
can
breaks
manifest it yourself.
the,
You know,
the 4-minute mile.
Yes.
Like you've got that. You've already got that for you.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's sick.
Yeah,
I know.
so my story was really similar. During juniors, I was winning a lot of nationals and domestic tournaments, and then I finished school 2015. I'd only ever competed as a junior internationally before, like at the junior worlds and stuff like that, but never really getting any good results really. I'd travelled sort of in the school holidays, like after Nathan had been to England, he said it was such a great place and you should definitely come across. And so I went over there in the school holidays over Christmas, I think 2 or 3 times, just for a month or 2 months, something like that. Mum and Dad were happy, to send me away over the school holidays. And then, so I finished school end of 2015 and just fought a couple of, 2 tournaments, I think, at like the first tier of seniors and didn't really do that well. Did okay, I think I won 1 or 2 fights and it didn't do amazing. And then 2016, the coach had said, just come and travel with the senior team for the first couple of tournaments, be a good experience. And then you can concentrate on juniors after sort of the Olympic team gets prepared. And then the first tournament of the year, 2016, I won a medal. And I think I was the only one to win a medal at the team that was there at the time. So that was a huge surprise for me. And I really wasn't expecting it. I was there pretty much to feel what it's like at a senior event, win one, maybe lose, and then go home and oh, that was cool. And then I won a medal. So
it was a joke, to be honest. So I was still in England. I got a good result in Japan end of 2015, which pretty much locked my spot up. So I was sort of preparing for the Olympics a bit earlier as opposed to still trying to qualify. But there was only really me and one other girl that had locked our spot in. So these guys went to Tunisia and we'd just been in a training camp in Austria. And Josh had done it pretty tough, like 17-year-old kid fighting literally grown men.
Yeah,
preparing
first
for the
training
Olympics.
camp, I was getting the absolute shit kicked out of me for a whole week.
Like, it's all right, just keep digging in. You'll do better in tournament against these boys than training because he was still pretty small, didn't cut much weight, and these are just big boys. And then I think probably there was 6 or 7 that went to Tunisia and probably 5 of them needed medals. Yeah. And Josh was just like, oh, drag along for the experience. And I sort of had a feeling that he was capable of really doing well, when he actually realised how good he was and once he dipped his toe in a little bit. And I think, like he said, 5 of them needed medals. Josh didn't really need one. He wasn't even meant to get one and he got one and the others didn't. So it was a bit... Was
that a part of the success? Did you feel like you just didn't have pressure, so you just had fun with it?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I don't think I really thought too much about it. But then afterwards, sort of reflecting on it, I think it was just I was just having fun. It was just a cool experience. I'd only ever fought as a junior before. And even as a junior, even if you're not expecting to do well, you're still kind of putting a little pressure on yourself. These are my peers. These are the guys I'm supposed to be beating. And then I think fighting as a senior, I was just I saw everyone else lose. Well, not everyone else. A few of the guys made a medal fight in the Australian team, but I was just like, oh, I'm not any worse than these guys in the Australian team. Like, I could at least do as well as these guys, I think. I thought anyway, and then I won a medal. So
Sick.
Went from there, and then the next event, I think I lost in the bronze medal fight. Made the finals block, lost in the bronze medal fight, and then from that point, they were like, you sort of one tournament away from qualifying, the last qualifying event, which was in Australia at the time. It was in Canberra in April. So with the AIS, and it was pretty much with the qualifying system at the time, if you didn't win that event, you weren't going to go. And I think there was about 7 or 8 of the Australians that were eligible to qualify. I think 6 won. I think only 1 or 2 didn't win at the time. So that was a pretty crazy day, to be honest. Like, everyone knew in the team that if you won, you went. If you didn't win, that was you done. So there was some nerves around that warm-up mat that morning. Someone like throwing up in the bin. Someone was like walking around with a stress ball. Me and Nathan, it would warm up for like 30 seconds and we'd push each other. Hey, don't leave me alone. So
it's amazing. You think like, why do you put yourselves through this?
Yeah.
What motivates you guys to do this?
I think, there's a lot of factors like motivation-wise, but one thing is just that feeling that you get when you win a big match or a big medal, or like those moments. It's like, I guess a lot of people talk about it like almost like that drug euphoric feeling, but then I feel like in a sport like judo, you have way more of the low and the tough moments, but you get one and you just want that again. Like, it doesn't matter how many of those bad moments that you've had to go through to get to that really good one. Getting that one, you almost feel like you've completely forgotten about all those really shit times, and just like constantly chasing like that target. I think we've had that Olympic goal. So our probably careers and goals have always been pretty Olympic orientated, winning Olympic medal, national anthem. If you win an Olympic gold medal, you hear the national anthem, like that's pretty special, or very special. So I think ours have always been like around Olympic Games, but I think it has changed as we get a little bit older. Like when I was a kid, 18, 17, traveling, didn't really like appreciate that much what you were seeing. You'd like go to France or Germany or whatever. You're like, yeah, it's cool. People speak French and German. Now you like appreciate the moments and the stadiums and the big crowds, and knowing that that's not something that you're going to do forever. I think like those big moments, walking out in front of big crowds, and especially if you fight a local from somewhere, like you're in France and you walk out to 15,000 people fighting a French kid and they're just booing you or hissing at you and stuff. It's pretty awesome.
This is so interesting. Hey, like me and you were talking about this before, Sel, how like the boys are just so polished sitting here in front of us and talking to us, and you can just see how professional this sport is. And the boys are talking about how much they've traveled and like trained in other countries. And, you know, we're used to sitting here talking to like MMA athletes and understanding that world. And it's still sort of becoming established, right? A sport like judo has like these deeply ingrained systems, and the AIS is involved, and there's scholarships, and there's all of these things to help these athletes get to the Olympics and represent the country and all of this sort of stuff. Can you guys tell us about, because obviously we're super used to looking at like an MMA athlete, for example, and there's a local circuit and they're trying to get wins, and they're trying to get to the bigger, stages and things like that. It's a very different sort of system to what you guys have been brought up in. How does someone get involved in judo and make it to the Olympics and train at the AIS and go to England and train and all of these sorts of places? Because we've sat here with athletes like Skye Nicholson, who's a boxer, who's also qualified for the Olympics and stuff like that, and she's on a similar pathway to you guys. I'm just super interested. How does this work?
I think there is a clearer pathway in terms of you sort of know the levels, the targets you have to hit to get to an Olympic level, whereas I think in MMA it's a little bit less clear.
It is.
Because you can go in different countries and different organizations, and I guess everyone sort of wants to get to the UFC, I guess, or another big organization. But in judo, you sort of are competing as a kid on domestically, and then you try to compete at the nationals, win a medal, and even if you sort of get selected into the national team at say 14 or 15, you sort of know, if I can do well at this event, then I can, as a junior, I'll go to the junior worlds. Then if I do well at the junior worlds, then as a senior, I can maybe win a medal at a World Cup, then a Grand Prix. So I think there is like a better idea of what tiers you have to get to. But in Australia, it's difficult as well, because it's not a very established sport in Australia, in the sense of we've had some big international medals in the past, but not for a really long time. So we don't necessarily have the same attention or the media or the funding that other sports get. So a lot of it is, I guess, you have to be independent as well. So when we were younger and we travelled to England, that was just off our own back. That was just us thinking we needed to be exposed to Europe and to the other countries to improve, because I guess we were looking at some of the other people at the time and we thought like we want to be better. Like we want to try to get to an Olympics, but like try to win a medal at the Olympics. So a lot of it is learning on the fly as well, to be fair. We sort of travelled thinking it was the right thing to do, and then you realise maybe that you could do something better, and you're just learning on the go. I think we're still learning, to be honest.
I think one thing with judo, like Olympic sports, is that it's pretty clear like what the end goal is. With MMA and stuff, it is. I mean, a lot of people want to get to the UFC or be world champion, but maybe not everyone does. Like some people might be sweet fighting Bellator or ONE or whatever like the organisation might be, or literally just fighting amateur. But I feel like most people that get into judo like as from a young age, or any sport, tennis, maybe not tennis because it's different, but the amateur sports, like the Olympics is a pretty clear goal. So it's sort of like just one thing to look at that everyone wants to be at. But like sort of touching on the money and stuff that Josh sort of said, was it's funny because the money and the opportunities are there like once you've already sort of made it, and you do need it at that point, but it's not like when you need the help the most. Whereas when you're 17, 16, whatever, when I first started traveling, a lot of that was because my parents just helped me out. Like when you were a kid, you can't afford to send yourself to Europe. So I was really fortunate that mum and dad, one, could afford to like send us away and help us, but also understood what we're actually doing. And they understood that, just because I feel like it's really tough. A lot of parents, when they're not involved in judo, they send their kid to Europe for a couple of weeks and they think they're going to come back and they've got Roger Federer or Conor McGregor or just someone like that. And it's just not realistic. Like it's such a long, hard slog to get the smallest taste of success. And it's just having mum and dad understand that and be supportive through that period was really important for us, because now we're pretty fortunate. We get a lot of help from a lot of different people, and we get to do judo full time without worrying too much about money and things like that. I mean, we still need help obviously, but when you're sort of not there yet, that's when you really, really need it, and that's when it's really hard to get. So,
tell us about how you boys have gone full time with that, because I know that's being an amateur sport going to the Olympics. It's not like you get paid to compete on the mats all the time, every time. It's not like a salary where you're a footy player, you're in the top 25 squad, you're guaranteed X amount of income, X amount of insurance, you get looked after. How do you boys, obviously it's a professionalism where you've worked to the point where you can get sponsors and everything like that, but what else do you guys do outside of obviously just competing to survive and stay above board? Yeah,
and sort of on that, it's cutthroat too. Like you, we're not on contracts in terms of salary, but in terms of getting trips and stuff like paid for, there's certain levels of categorization in terms of how much support you get for those. And I got injured a couple of years ago. I broke a bone in the bottom of my back, and it had been probably off the back of 3 months of not having my best results. I'd had some other injuries before and just some issues, and then I got dropped. So then zero, no money. And I'm like, shit, I'm 22, 23. What are you meant to do? Like, I can't train full time and work full time. Like you can only, and I feel like that's something that me and Josh are probably two of the first ones to sort of do in Australia, where we understood that, in my opinion, it's not possible to train full time and work full time and be the best in the world. Like there has to be a sacrifice. So I can't drive around a Merc or a Range Rover because I can't save that much money. Like the money that I'm making or whatever is going towards that dream. But we do bits and pieces. Like we have a couple of sponsors that help us out, and Judo Australia now does support us a lot with trips and bits and pieces like that. We go across Australia and do seminars, and we do quite a few PTs and one-on-one judo stuff, small group judo, BJJ, MMA, grappling. When we're at home,
after the Olympics as well, the AOC started getting us a lot more involved, especially as brothers. Like it's quite a good story, and there's not a whole lot of siblings in the Olympic team. So we started doing a lot more stuff with them, and we started speaking in some schools as well. Cool. So New South Wales, they introduced it early last year. We just go around different schools across New South Wales and talk to Year 9 and just about motivation and goal setting and stuff like that. So we really enjoy that as well. Doesn't feel like a job at all, but definitely helps, especially while we're at home as well.
That's so sick. For anyone who's seen judo, you're literally getting thrown on your ass for the whole session. Like it is brutal. So like, how do you guys like manage to look after your bodies and injuries? Do you feel like you've just done it so much that you've conditioned your bodies? Like you're obviously falling properly, so you're not hurting yourselves. You can do it repetitively. Just tell us what your sort of conditioning sort of workouts look like, and how much outside of skill training, what do you guys get up to in that way?
Yeah, so it's been a gradual process in terms of like managing your body. Like when I hadn't had too many major injuries, like a few little things when I was younger, but nothing pretty serious. I mean, we weren't training full time when we were at school. We'd do session in the morning before we'd go to school, and then we'd train in the night, but not every day. And it was a bit mismatch because just there was only so much sort of sessions available at that age. But then as soon as I finished school at 17, I moved to England. I went from maybe doing 10 sessions a week to like 18 sessions a week, and the intensity was not even comparable, and the type of bodies I was dealing with was not even comparable. So straight away my body was breaking down, and not because it was probably breaking down because I was pretty tough mentally as a kid. Like I would get a little niggle and just be like, nah, like don't worry about that. Like just get through that. And while that is good sometimes, it isn't always helpful long term. And I ran myself into the ground a few times with stuff that probably could have been dealt with straight away. Like I think 19 or 20, and I had tonsillitis, and I think Josh was actually away with mum and dad at Cadet World Championships, like under 17 Worlds, and I was at home preparing for my World Championships by myself. And I just got tonsillitis, went to the doctor, got some antibiotics, and she said, oh, don't train for a couple of days, like just take the antibiotics. And I'd spoken to the coach in England on the phone, and he sent me like through a new conditioning program and stuff with some long intervals, and got home from literally popped the antibiotics, and I was like, all right, sweet, let's start training. And I trained really hard for like 4 or 5 days and just was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And I just got to the point where I was like real crook. Like I jumped in the shower and came out, and I was like so tired from a shower. I fell asleep for a couple of hours, and then I was like, geez, this isn't too good. Like it's not too normal. And then that night I think I got in the bath and I fell asleep in the bath, and I was like, couldn't swallow. So I ended up calling one of my mates, and I went just to a doctor, and I had glandular fever. So I ended up on hospital for like 4 days with the drip, just from being a dickhead. I mean, like not just stupid. And I feel like as we get older now, we're pretty lucky and fortunate with we got a good sponsor who looks after all our physio and massage and strength and conditioning. So little stuff you can actually deal with before it becomes something significant. And you still get a contact sport, you still get freak stuff happen. Like got a knee in the back a couple of years ago, which turned into just like a broken bone and stuff like that, which is Josh ripped his elbow last year in Perth, just completely.
I feel like you need to go through those, like as bad as it sounds, like you need to go through the really dumb times to then understand like what is bad and what is just like a niggle. I mean, I was the same. I tore my elbow. I had to have surgery after a competition in Perth last year, and I was like in the best shape I've probably ever been in. It's just like a freak accident. But there's been other times where I think the times you're most vulnerable to stuff is when you're trying to lose weight before a competition, because you're in that deficit, and if you're on a training camp as well, the intensity is higher, the volume's higher, and if you're not sort of recovering properly and you're trying to lose loads of weight at the same time, like it's the two worst possible things to happen.
Tell us a bit about that weight cutting process, because I know a lot of combat athletes experience it. Judo experiences it probably at the judokans and wrestlers experience it probably the worst in terms of constantly having to do it match after match, because an MMA fight, a guy may fight twice a year, 3 times a year, so they'll have to do that weight cut 3 times. So you guys, like you were saying before, can be doing it night after night in competition, which would be absolutely brutal, particularly at a young age where, as you said, you know nothing about nutrition, you're kind of winging it, hopping in the sauna, just going off bro science, and then
your body's still developing.
Exactly, yeah. You're growing at different rates. Obviously, you hit puberty, so you can jump up in size as well. Did you guys get advice from the parents, or was it a case of you were so mentally tough you would just drop the weight, hop on the mat, and just keep doing it over and over again?
I guess a mix. So mum and dad were pretty strict on us not cutting weight. Like as kids, we didn't even think about it. Like you'd rock up to a tournament, you have breakfast at home, then you jump on the scale in your boxes, and then
that's good.
Whatever weight you were, then you fought. But you see some mad stuff like parents and stuff, and we're now so strict at our club. Like that's not a thing. Like
I was like so small that I was I was like 2 kilos under the weight limit every single time anyway. So I think mum and dad even like took me out for like a year when I was like 7 or 8, because they just said, you're too small, you're not fighting for a year, like just wait till you grow.
But we just don't have that with kids now. Like it's the worst thing in the world having kids worrying about their weight, one physically but mentally too.
Exactly.
I probably started about 15 starting to be conscious, and I almost wish I had have waited a bit longer, because I've done it now for so long that I'm like, man, this is so bad. But I think that was like the line, because I was quite successful at that age, that I couldn't just fight seniors at whatever weight I felt like, because it was hard enough as it was. with those guys to deal with. So I would encourage people to hold off as long as possible.
Do you guys have dietitians helping you with weight cuts?
We have before. So I've probably had 3 or 4 different people since I was 16 or 17 looking after all of my weight. But
to be honest, it's tricky because the most I think of the sort of weight cut management specialists, most of them are MMA based, where you are competing, like you said, 3 times a year. So they do have generally a bigger cut each time, but we have to compete usually like 10 times a year. Like the goal is to try to compete 10 times a year or more.
So you weigh in day of match,
night before.
Oh, you do, mate.
So you weigh in, but usually like 8 o'clock the night before, and competition starts 10 a.m. the next day.
But the stitch up is now they introduced a thing where you weigh in at 8 p.m, competition starts 10 a.m, but 9 a.m, they put 4 names of anyone in the tournament on a wall, and you have to be within 5%. So you can't just, which is like, I reckon that's almost worse than the weight. Well, it's not worse, but it's close because I probably start sweating from about 70.5 to get to 66, and 5% 69.3. So I have to rock up to the tournament at 69.3. Otherwise, like, I don't want to be that guy sweating 15 minutes before he's about to fight. Like, it just throws you off. And if you're one of the early fights in the day, like, you don't feel 100% yet. Like, it's just, you haven't fully recovered. You still feel a bit drained, but I guess it's just something now that you're used to and you deal with. But yeah, like I said, we have had people help us before. Now I guess we have a pretty good understanding of what works for us. Like, I would like someone that was really good to look after me, just in the sense that it just takes all of the worry away from you dealing with yourself. Like, mentally, the strain and the stress of wondering, oh, should I be weighing this? What should I do? But I'd rather have just myself and like back myself that I know what I'm doing and it's on me than have someone that I'm not 100% confident in the process, because we have had people before that they sell you the dream about how good it's going to be and look after you, and then at the end of the day they're not the one that's got to be in the bathtub stinging if they've messed you around a little bit.
I think it's similar to the injuries like we're talking about. You actually, as bad as it is, like, you sort of need the one bad experience that in your head you think like, I can't do that again. Like I fought so bad the next day and I just felt so bad in the warm up, and like I just, like, your body just, you're shutting down, like even when you're trying to compete the next day. And you almost need that one experience, as bad as it is. You don't want it when you're a kid, obviously, but the one time in your head that you're thinking, all right, like, maybe I should just like start a little bit earlier, like start dieting 1 week earlier, or after the competition, like just get back on it straight away. And
I once did a wrestling comp and I lost 10 kilos in 1 week. I was just like on 800 calories, just like losing, which is a lot of, like, in this day and age, it's not that bad, because a lot of guys, especially in MMA and stuff, are losing 10 kilos in a night, you know, but if it was bad for me, and I just bought new scales, and I weighed in, hadn't eaten anything all night, was chapped, as dehydrated as you could be, and I was perfect on my scales, brand new scales, and drove up to Brisbane for a wrestling comp, and jumped on their scales, and I was a kilo over on their scales, and they were like, nah, man, you gotta go cut this weight. So I like literally just put on my sweats, running around the comp, and then weighed in, and then just jumped straight into the cage. And I was just like, fuck. It was just like the worst thing. And that was my moment where you were just like, you need to have that bad experience. I had that bad experience.
A few mad stories. Like, I was in England, and a friend of ours in Spain owns like a club team, and he messaged me saying he wanted me to come and fight for their team. Like, he'd pay me to fight. And I was like, yeah, sweet. They've got like a professional league in Spain. I was like, sick, this would be good. He's like, oh, I'll pay you this, and then we'll pay for your flights, accommodation. I was like, I didn't really care what the money was. I was like, get away to Spain for a weekend, fight, have a bit of a feed, whatever, I'll be sweet. And he sold me the dream. He's like, oh, you only have to make 5%. And I was like, sweet, no worries. So 69.3. I was like, that's all right. I'm about 72. Like, that won't be too bad. I'll just sweat it off. So I didn't like worry about my weight too much. And then about a week before, he's like, oh, I'm not sure if it's 5%. It might be 1 kilo. I was like, fuck, that's a bit of a difference from 5%, mate. But all right, like, no worries. I said I'd do it, and I was looking forward to getting away. And then about 2 days before, and I was like, I wasn't taking this weight cut too serious. I was about 21. And I think I was getting on the mat to start sweating off. I was leaving the next day. And he goes, oh, it might be 500 grams. Just we'll let you know when we get here. And for me, like, 500 grams to a kilo, that's a big deal at that last difference. bit. And anyway, I got there, and he told me, 500 grams. And I was like, geez. And I was hurting bad. Like, I'd probably sweated from way higher than what I should have. And then I rocked up to the tournament 500 grams over. And this was a different, like, a teams event where you weighed in 1 hour before you fought. And I was just thinking to myself, man, if there's anyone good here for me to fight, I'm in big trouble, because I'm feeling horrendous. And I rocked up 500 grams over. and then I went to get on the scale, and there was no 500 gram weight allowance. It was just like you weigh.
Yeah.
And at that point, like I was completely dry, and this bloke looked at me and he's like, "Oh, I've paid you. Like you have to make weight." And I was like, "Mate, what do you want me to do? Like I've just been in the bath all morning." So I just chucked. Like I didn't even take anything. I was just in shorts and t-shirt, and I have no idea how I made the weight, but because it took me so long to end up making, I didn't even have the full hour. So I had like 30 minutes until the first fight. But so I was like, had like Gatorade in one hand, like some little protein bar in the other, but I was feeling sick just drinking anything with a bit of sugar, trying to strap my fingers to get ready to fight. And I was like, "Oh, I won't fight the first round. Like I'll do the next one." He's like, "No, we need international player. Like we need you for the first one." And I remember I threw this boy like Uchimata, like your leg goes real high in the air, and it was flat in his back. And I was like, "Thank fuck for that." Like I needed that to be done.
Yeah.
And the referee like Ippon, which means like it's done. And then the two corner judges waved it down to Azari, like to mean the match has to keep going. You got to do that again. And I just like had one of the worst cramps in my entire life, like just through my leg. And I just looked at our coach and I was like, "Mate, I'm genuinely not sure if I'm finishing this fight."
Yeah.
I remember watching it. I think I was in Japan training, and like he'd rang me like while he was like sweating off, and just like I knew how bad he was making weight. And I was watching him fight, and I didn't know that he had to lose the weight at the tournament.
Yeah.
So when I was watching it, I was like, "Why is Nathan fighting so shit? Like, come on, mate! Like, this guy fighting's not even that good. Like, why can't you just beat him?"
And I remember just like had those little puppy dog eyes looking at the coach, like, "Mate, sub me out. Like I'm done." And geez, I scraped through.
Yeah.
And I've never felt so bad. Like I genuinely was just laying off the mat, like felt like my body was shutting down. I was like, and then he messaged me a few weeks later. He's like, "Oh, teams event, Nathan, teams event, 5% this time." And I just left him on red. I was like, "Mate, that's not happening."
Fucking dog.
You're not getting done twice a day.
What an absolute stitch up. With the travel, obviously, probably the best experience, particularly young, you guys getting to travel at a young age. I think it matures, as we can tell, matures you quickly, because most Australian kids genuinely will do the trade, uni, one of the two, miss out on a lot of travel experiences, miss out on a lot of cultural experiences. You guys have already done all that from a young age. What have you learned, obviously, from, as you were saying, France, Germany, different parts of Europe, I'm assuming South America, obviously, because you guys went there for the Olympics, that you've brought back here, because you also have a judo school as well, where you're teaching the next generation to come through. So I'm sure you're giving them heaps of pointers and learning lessons from all your travel experience. Is there anything that you've learned in particular from any other country that you think has really transferred well over to both of you, or just individually?
Yeah, I think you definitely try to take a little bit from every place that you've been to. Not everywhere is you want to take it too much from. And I guess the difference in Australia is like it's quite a different culture to the rest of the world. Some of the countries that we go to for judo, they're sort of in the mindset that like if we just beast everyone like as hard as you possibly can, 95% of them will like break in half and like they'll go and do something else. But the 5 that are here like will be sick and like they'll go to the Worlds and like be able to win a medal at the Worlds. And in Australia, like you just don't have that ability to just
You end up in jail if you push it too hard. Like
to absolutely beast kids until like their parents are sitting on the side like, "What are you doing?" Like my kid's like 10, like you can't do that to him. So you can't do that here. So I think other than like the technical aspects and like different elements of training, I guess what we try to do is just get the kids to be a little more serious earlier. I guess it's difficult to, especially in Australia, like you're already up against it because we don't have like a really established training system. There's not many athletes full time at all. You're traveling across the world to get to any tournament overseas. So by the time you get to like 17, 18, and then it's like, all right, like I've had fun at school, like now I'm going to start training. Like it's not too late, but like you're making it more difficult than it is already, which is already really difficult. So I guess the kids that we have a little more to do with individually, we just try to get them to be a little bit more serious about training earlier, like not playing other sports, because I played soccer until I was like 15. So I was like, you can still play the other sports, but like when you're at judo, like you got to take judo seriously. Like if you have time at home, like go for a run, like just to get into the habit of like trying to be a little more serious about judo and not necessarily making judo your priority, but when you're knowing in your head that like I'm trying to get better at judo all the time, not just like train twice a week and then when I finish school like I'll start training full time, because it doesn't really work.
It's a really fine line between like fostering the kids like to have that love for the sport, because at the end of the day, like that's probably the reason we're still going, is because we do love what we're doing. So if they at 13, 14 aren't loving it, it's like, this ain't for you, mate. Like if you don't really love this, because you're not going to drive a Ferrari off judo.
Yeah.
So forget about like being the richest guy in the world off judo.
And it's not that hard when you're 14. So if you don't love it, you're definitely not going to love it when it's.
And it's like, you don't try and just sell these kids the dream that like they're going to end up with it all off this. It's like, you could be really good if you really commit.
Yeah.
But you still might not. Like it doesn't. There's plenty of people we've looked at, and I'm like, I'm certain they could become an Olympian or win big medals, and it doesn't happen for whatever reason. So it's like fostering that love, but then still like if they have that talent and that love, then you have to push them at a young age, because it's too late. It's too late at 17, 18 to be like, yeah, I really want to be good at this, because these guys in like underprivileged parts of the world, their parents, and there's none of this like looking after them and being nice to them. They've been getting beasted since they're kids. And you can't catch that up once you're 17, 18.
That's what I was going to ask. How do you bridge that gap here? Because like if you're talking any of the countries, be it a Cuba or a Russia, they're effectively fighting for their food. It's different here where we're fortunate. You live a great life. Most people would have a house, would have a family. To be honest, if they're in a gym, they're probably doing better than 90% of the people in the world. So they may take that for granted, whereas in another country where it's literally kill or be killed. And you boys are at the top of your sport. How do you bridge that gap? Because it is a different mindset, different animal altogether.
I think it's a bit of that thing that we've picked up like from the travel as well. Like you do get that appreciation for how lucky we are to have what we have from a pretty young age. Like I started traveling at 15.
Yep.
So you see stuff that is hard to see in some countries. One, maybe like the way women get treated, or two, the way that kids are treated, or just the whole poverty side of things that we really don't appreciate much or experience much. I mean, if we go to the city to train, sometimes you'll see a couple of homeless people, but it's not in your face. And I guess it's not so confronting. There's a few things that can be tough, but when you actually get to experience that, you're like, geez, I have it good here. But then I think in terms of bridging the gap, you can in the terms of getting competitive, but you can't try and go, oh, these kids have grown up with nothing. Yeah. How do I convince myself I've grown up with nothing?
Yeah.
Like
to be
that?
honest,
Exactly.
like it's not realistic, in my opinion, for like to be the best in the world in Australia, like 15. Like it's just, you don't have the years of build up and like physical maturity, and potentially some supplement use as well that like some other countries do. So I think it's just like trying to stay the course, like trying to get serious early and staying the course, like just like be patient, go to the worlds, get experience, try to win some fights at all the tournaments you're going to, but like the big results will come later. Like it's hard as well, because especially the kids that you're pushing, like, you know, you can be really good. Like you could go to Olympics one day if you like really commit to it, and then they go to like a world at 16 and like lose first fight. They're like, you told me I was good. Like, and it's like, yeah, I know, I lost first fight as well at that same world. It's like, it is difficult sometimes. And I mean, most just don't carry out, to be honest, because it's just other things going on, and you get the opportunity when you leave school to get a nice job or hang out with your friends. And at that, it's like that fine age, I think, between like 18 and 20, especially in your last couple of years as a junior, where judo starts getting a little bit harder. And when you start to fight as a senior, like you will start losing pretty like a lot straight away as a senior, especially because it's a big jump. And it's just trying to get the ones that love it and they're good to like keep pushing through.
I try and look at it as like these kids or these guys that we're fighting now from whatever country, whatever part of the world might have it tough, but I look at it as like, I feel like me and Josh work as hard, if not harder than anyone that we could fight. Like I believe in the work that we put in, and I know that for us to travel and do what we do, there is a lot of sacrifice. And even these countries now that maybe don't have money, they're all like really looked after. Like there's not too many of like the real poor judo people from these countries. Like they might be from really poor parts of the world, but because of who they are now, at our level anyway, as kids it's different, but at like Olympic level, they're all like dressed in better clothes than me or want better cars than me. Like I don't know what's going on there, but so I sort of look at it as like, I'm giving up a lot to be here. Like these guys can't want it as much as you. Like you just got to rip in and.
That was exactly the question I was going to ask, because I liked where Sel was heading with this, because there's this mentality where you're standing across the mat from a guy from Russia or Cuba, like you said, and you're like, far out, I'm in for a fight. Like this guy has had to, like you said, fight for his food, and his family, you know, are hoping that, you know, the investment of having a child become an athlete superstar is going to put food on their table. And that's what we think from the outside. But I love hearing what you guys are saying. You're like, nah, I think think we've worked harder. Like they're actually getting looked after. So you're seeing on the inside what's happening.
A lot of it's just self-belief. I mean, like if I lose to someone from Russia, for example, if they're better, like no worries, he's better today. Yeah. But it's not because like I think he's worked harder or I think he wants it more. Like I can't lose a match in my head that's like I just gave up at the end. Like if this match goes 10 minutes, like I'm gonna win. Because if there's one of us standing at the end, like it's gonna be me. And to be honest, most of the matches I've ever lost have been like earlier. The guy's just been too good and I've been thrown in like the first 2 or 3 minutes. I was like, all right, fair play, no worries. Eventually I'll get him one day. But like if the fight goes like 5 minutes, 6 minutes, we start getting into like overtime, I'm not losing this fight. Like
this is the championship mindset.
Yeah, for sure.
Where does this come from? Because most people would be like, they would be done from the start. They'd be standing in front of that guy and be like, he's from Russia, I'm fucked.
Yeah, I like talking about stuff like this too, because like I sort of look at some of them and I'm like, you can't say it categorically, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're cheating. Like I'm pretty confident. Like I'm pretty confident from where you're from. No one's waking you up at 6 a.m. to check your pee and blood. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas that is happening to me. So I'm like, well, that's one thing for certain that I'm not doing that you're doing. So I'm like, fuck, you can't let this bloke do you. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so that's one thing I sort of look at, and they might be trying to feed their family, and I'm certainly not trying to pretend I'm trying to feed my family, but I want to look after myself and mine too. At the end of the day, like I'd love to win Olympic gold medal, set myself up completely, look after my parents, look after my kids, future kids, not current, but look after myself in the future. So it's all just perspective, but I guess like the championship mindset sort of thing, it's like what Josh touched on. It's sort of doing that work. So when you get there, you know that there are people I know if I get to the Olympics next year, there will be people there better. Like for a fact, there are people in the world that are better, more technical, fitter, maybe not fitter, but stronger, whatever it might be. More technical, more skillful, but I do believe that like we want to win more than any of them. So it's just like hanging in there, digging in, and knowing that if it gets to that point in the match where it's sort of the level we're both tired, so the level starts to even out a little bit more, and it's like who really wants to win, who believes they can win, and then that's sort of where it like kicks in. It doesn't happen every time, but if you can put yourself in that situation where you believe that we're both tired now, but like there's no better feeling than looking at someone and seeing them tired and like hanging, and you know you're tired, but it's like I'm not as tired as him. Like let's just break him.
So does your fitness give you confidence?
Yeah, I think I've always been smaller when I was like growing up, and I mean it is that little brother thing as well. Like you're always like less physically mature, less strong, and I've never naturally been super strong. Like I've always been quite skillful, like and quite technical, and always had a really good like engine. So I've just my goal is always to just like keep pushing through. The first couple of minutes is always pretty tough, especially against the best guys, because they're just like super strong, super explosive. They're just like they come out of the gates hard, and that's not necessarily my style of fighting. So for me, it's just like just dig in, like get through the first 2 minutes, like hang on, and then like from there, like it's like a little sick thing in your head, but it's like there is actually no better feeling than like watching someone like look at their coach when they're just like the referee,
look at the clock.
The referee like says, "Oh, like come back and start again," and the guy's just like getting up slowly, and you just think like,
you know, they don't want it anymore.
It's like it is a little sick in your head, but like I've cracked him now. Like this is awesome.
I'd love that though in MMA. Like when you see those looks of the guys, and they just don't want it anymore. And at the end of the day, judo is pretty rule based. There's only so much you can do, but I love that when you see, like when you're watching some fights and stuff.
Trying to bend the rules, like, oh, he's trying to tie his gi a little slowly. The referee's like, hurry up, mate. And I'm like, when we start again, like, this is on.
Sending you to the moon.
That's it. Touching on that, I think there's also this mentality that I've heard a lot of people say that if you're a fighter, across any combat type of sport, they try to position the person that may have had a less privileged life or less money as the one that has more to fight for. But it's not necessarily always the case, particularly when your parents have sacrificed a lot for you guys to get where you are. You've sacrificed a lot within whatever you boys are doing. And this mentality that you have to be from less to have that fight within you, I think is completely backwards. Like I've even had it said to me that, oh, you wouldn't be good at this because you've had money or you've had this. And I look at it in the opposite way, that I'm here because my parents gave up a ridiculous amount for me to sit in this position. So I'll fight harder than anyone for them, for my kids, whoever it may be. And there's a lot of people that just have quit in them simply because they've lived a privileged life and they've just become soft. But then I know a lot of people that have also at the same time lived a really great life, but you'll never ever see them quit. Like they just don't have it in them. And I've always, me and Miles talk about it all the time. I've always said, is that born in someone where they'll give up on themselves, or is that a societal, environmental type of aspect where over time things have become easy and cushy, and then they're just like, it doesn't really matter. And it's like this nature and nurture thing is something that I constantly ask.
The forever question.
Yeah, it's just something you probably will never know in your guys' situation, because you're brothers. There has to be some level of DNA that is naturally been given to you from your family, but there's also a level of you've just seen so much together that you keep pushing each other further.
Yeah,
So
I think that's bang on. Like I reckon most of it though is just an excuse. Like it's you get some people that they are privileged, or they've come from. I mean, we certainly didn't grow up rich, but we certainly didn't grow up like underprivileged. Far from it. We were just like normal, middle, but anything we needed, like we were fortunate enough to get. But I think it's most people just like for a lot of people, and we've learned this as well, judo at a high level in sport, is that for some people it's easier to find the reason why they haven't done something as opposed to like have a really hard look in the mirror. I've had plenty before where you feel like maybe a referee's giving you a bad decision, or you felt like you were a bit hard done by or whatever, and it's a lot easier to like when you lose a match try and find something like, oh, I didn't cut weight well, or I'm a bit injured, or at the end of the day the dude was better than you, referee, whatever. If you're that much better than someone, the referee can't screw you, and if you're that much better than someone, your injury or your cold or your runny nose or whatever isn't the reason why you lost. And we've had a couple moments. I've had a few, probably late last, I don't know what the years are now. Basically, this year's been a mess, but I think early last year, and I had to sort of look at myself, and I was like, I was in about a 4-month period where I just couldn't win matches, and I couldn't work out why. Like I was struggling with my weight. I was really missing home. I was going for a few, I guess, like personal stuff. And there were some, I guess, extenuating circumstances in some matches. I felt like they were refereed harshly, or just some things didn't go my way. And like I had a good chat with my dad and Daniel Kelly, who's our national coach, about it. And he was just like, you just have to like look at yourself in the mirror and be like, well, you can't, at the end of the day, if you can always blame someone else for why it didn't go right, you never really actually deal with, maybe I'm actually not good enough. And so I just came to the conclusion that like, well, you are good enough. If you lose because of whatever, it's on you. Like you have to take responsibility for that. And I think that's the same thing in terms of like the privilege. If you've had a really good upbringing and now you're really fortunate and whatever, if people say, oh, he doesn't have it in him because of this, it's like, well, that's just an excuse. At the end of the day, everyone's got it in him. It's just if you choose to listen to that little bit of quit, because that's there every day. Like every match, just because we're saying, I feel like I'm really mentally strong and fit, there's still that quit there constantly where it's like, I'm really hurting now. He's really hurting, but you just got to be like, shut up, just keep going, because at the end of the day, the quit is what hurts me. Like and it has been moments in matches before. Like I'm not saying I've never felt like I haven't been mentally tough in a match. There's been some where I've sort of mentally caved a bit, and they're the ones that like that keep you up at night. Yeah, they're the most difficult ones to deal with, because it's like you can't quit on yourself. I can live with someone being better, but not being tougher or wanting it more. I think that's disappointing, because you're right. In terms of people giving up a lot, like our parents, I've spent a lot of time away from my family since I was 15, 16. And as your parents get older, I start to have a more of appreciation of they're not going to be around forever. And I guess different stuff that's happened like along the way, you sort of get an appreciation for like how fortunate we are. And by how fortunate we are, there is a lot you have to give up, and people have given up for us to be where we are now. So trying to fight with that.
Are your parents still involved as coaches?
So our dad is still like our main coach at home. Mum still isn't as involved as she can, but she has more of an emphasis with the juniors at our club. So dad's our personal coach, and then we obviously have a lot to do now with the national coach and stuff as well. But I think what you're saying about motivation is 100% right. Like it is bred that quit, and it develops over time. Like if you need a different motivation, like if you are not fighting for money, you need a reason that are fighting. Like why I don't have to do this. Like I could go and get a nice job and probably pay for a nice car and live in a nice house or whatever. Like I don't need to do this. So it's like having that reason why you are training every day, because that little quit, like it develops through training. Like if you give yourself an out in training every single time, then when you're under the most intense circumstances with the hardest person you ever fought, and you're like 6 minutes into extra time, like that's where what happened at training is going to come out in the competition. Because if you quit every time in training or even like once a week, if it gets to the hard point in competition, like
you can't decide when you don't want to quit.
Yeah.
It's not a choice at that point. Like it's something that you have to develop. And I think you only develop it by like realizing what your actual motivation is. Like if I try to train every day because like, oh, I want to make money, like it's not happening. Like if I want to run hard every day because I want a nice car, like I'm not getting that at the end. Like that's not why it's happening. So
it's so true. I hear heaps of people talk about Conor McGregor now because he's minted, obviously. And they look at him back then, they look at him now, he's fighting in January. And people always refer to him with money. And I've always referred to him as just the guy that he was doing this before he had money and he's still doing it now. He sure as shit doesn't need to do it now.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't need it at all. Not for a second, yet he's still doing it. So what drives him? And I've always wished like one day to get into the mindset of someone like that because
you do have that. It just comes out in different ways.
Yeah.
It's just not in a cage.
So
I think there's different tiers of money. He's obviously at like the top level.
Yeah.
But like it is with everything. Like if you just want to upgrade your car like a tiny bit, like do you need to do it or do you want like are you training for that or
there's a reason why you were at the gym at 5 this morning doing a metabolic conditioning class and then you were in here straight after. That's what it is.
Some people live that there. I guess they get to demonstrate their motivation on TV on pay-per-view to 2 million, and some people do it like in a dark room at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning. So
100%.
the McGregor one, that's bang on. I think I argued with someone about that the other day because they're like, oh, it's money. It's like, mate, he doesn't have to lift a finger.
Sure as shit isn't money. And for anyone that I tend to hang with, or I'm sure you boys are the same, some of them are the most successful, money wealthy people you'll ever meet, but none of them do it for money. I actually don't have any friends or anyone
That's the
in my
biggest
circle
myth I've ever seen that has growing up.
That has ever done it for money. And if they have, they're probably fallen away and we're not tight anymore, because if you're doing it strictly for the money, you would have fallen away a long time ago. No one sticks with things strictly for money because it fades.
Or you can't get to your potential.
No, you definitely can't. It fades. It takes you off track. There's too many potholes and little shortcuts that come with that where you'll stop because when is enough money enough? What will keep you going when you get that little, whatever it may be? It may be $100 you were striving for, maybe $1,000, which is why obviously Dallas had pointed me out to you boys why we wanted to get associated with you and work with you, where it was about obviously a lot more. It was never about that because you would have picked a different sport. If it was truly about money, you're both athletes.
Have you considered it? Have you considered moving over to MMA or anything like that and using your skills to make more money?
Yeah, for sure. I guess on the last little bit about like the people like you associate and stuff with, that's massive for me and Josh because we've had, on touching on like Dallas, we've had managers before where our relationship's been an email and then email back, and like whereas Dallas is like, I posted something a few days ago, like a young junior coach of ours like passed away last week, and he was in his 80s and stuff, and I posted something on Instagram about 6 in the morning, and like Dallas called me like 15 minutes later, and like they're not relationships I have with people like that in the past, so it's like those people that they're the people you want to be around, and that's sort of how we got in touch with you guys. Like Dallas said, oh, there's other companies that are maybe bigger and like can offer you more right now, but these are people that I believe in and like they're good people, and like that's what we care more about than like someone that hands us a couple $50 notes now and then or whatever, throws whatever you want at you, but it's like those relationships that
you grow together authentically and then the money comes.
They're not going to be there when you go through that rough patch where maybe you have a bad injury, you're out for a year, or maybe you just like struggling a little bit and need a break from it. Like those people aren't going to be there anymore because you're not offering them anything anymore.
The MMA one's interesting though. Like when I was younger, I thought, nah, never. Like I think I was still sold the dream a bit more that no matter like if I got good enough at judo, like the money would be there, and that it will be to an extent. Like if you can win Olympic medals, you can be looked after. But I wouldn't say, I don't know. It's more, I guess, like the challenge of doing something completely different, which is exciting. We've started like wrestling more this year, like away from judo, just for a bit of cross training, and that's good fun at Smeaton Grange, like Whitaker's gym.
Sweet.
So some good guys there, and only wrestling at the moment. Like we've done jits and stuff like that, but I guess it's like exciting to want to test yourself differently because I've done judo from such a young age. So we'll get through this Olympics, get through Com Games next year, and then see what happens.
See-
I wouldn't say no, but
I think you have to.
scare the shit out of my mum if she
I think the only way it could work is if like you are as committed to it as you are to judo. Like
Yeah.
if you can't develop the same level of motivation and passion for that as you could judo, then it's not
There's no
happening.
point.
Like you said about the money thing, that would be one thing, like because there is more money opportunities, but I wouldn't do it because I wanted to have like 3 or 4 fights just to see if I could do it. I think like our personality is just too much. Like if I switched, I'd end up wanting to be the best, like for fact.
All
I
in.
couldn't deal with losing or, and it's dangerous too. Like it's not a safe sport to see, oh yeah, like we'll see how I go. Judo, you can go in a competition and it's not, the worst thing can happen. You get thrown on your back and you got a sore bum or whatever. But MMA, there's health implications to not taking it seriously. So
I'm super interested before we finish up to chat about the relationship with your parents, because I think there's some unicorn relationships where parents and athletes and their kids can work together. You look at Elliot and Steve Compton; they're really good at establishing like a work relationship versus parenting relationship outside of the gym. And then you see some that just go horribly wrong, and the athlete or the child or the kid, whatever, can never reach their potential because their parents, they want the best for their kids, but they're actually holding them back, and they don't realize they're holding them back from a lot of opportunities and things like that. You guys have got to the top. So obviously you've got a good, and your father's still your main coach. So obviously you guys have built a really good relationship and maybe some boundaries. Can you guys talk us through, how it is for you guys? Has it been good? Has it been bad? Just give some, I know a lot of our audience might work with their parents.
yeah.
Like what's some advice that you could give?
I think we've managed it really well, especially when we were younger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you were saying as well, where the parent can stop them from achieving their potential. There's also like the case where the kid gets to the top, but like they're not their dad anymore. Like they're not their mum or their dad anymore. Like they're just coach.
Yeah.
I heard that with that Teofimo Lopez the other day, and he was saying something where like he was crying talking about his dad.
Yeah.
And he was just saying like, it's my coach, it's not
I
my
wish
dad.
I wish you could be like my dad a little bit more.
Yeah.
And like
I think that's pretty sad. Like our dad's still our dad. Like at the end of the
That's
day,
hard, man.
I think he's our dad more than our coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that fine line, it is a fine line.
Super fine line.
And it gets crossed all the time. And then it's just about like trying to bring, I think that's why mum's so good, because she has less to do with us on the mat now. So she sort of stepped away from giving us more technical advice. Like it'll come in sometimes, but she's more like supportive and trying to keep the family side of things together.
Was that on purpose? Like, did you guys have a family discussion or something?
I think she just naturally
Yeah.
took that approach.
Yeah.
Like she could have a lot more to do with us. Like in a coach, it could literally be a dual coach.
Yeah.
If that's what they wanted. But I think she felt better about like having a better like home life and like everything else being tailored better towards like we have good family life, we have good judo life, because they're the main coaches at our judo club as well. So we come home from every judo session and it's like, Mom, how was your session? Like, how was the juniors? And then Dad, like, how was your session? And then they ask us, how was your session? And it's like everything in our home, like, is centered around judo. Like, we don't like we can't take that. We can't completely separate the two because it's so heavily a part of our life. And I think because we have had so much travel, then it is that natural break as well. Like, you do get that split where when we're ringing Mum and Dad, like when we're overseas for like 2 months, like they'll chat to us a little bit about training, but then it's like, what else is happening? Like, did you go out and chat to anyone? Like, what did you see? We ask them like, how's home life going? How's the club going? And you do get a little bit more split. This year's obviously been a little bit different. Like it has been, I think the line has been crossed a little bit more because we're just training and at home and no competitions. Like it was high stress as well when you think you're traveling and you're not traveling and loads of competitions are getting pulled out from under us at the last minute. And I mean, we were super stressed. Like it was hard to prepare for events that you didn't know if they were going to happen or not. And then you sort of have that like the crossover where like you come back home from a bad session, and if you fought with your coach at the session, you come home and that guy's still there. Like he's still, and you're trying to separate the two, which does get difficult sometimes. And I think when we start traveling as well, I think it'll naturally just go back to a little bit.
You guys have obviously done a really good job with it because I call them the tennis dad. I grew up playing tennis and they're the worst. Like you see them, all of us would have seen Yelena Dockett's dad like getting arrested and pulled out of Tomic. Like they're just known for overstepping the mark and being too full on, effectively really trying to live their vicarious dream through their kid and really fucking up. Like there is, I think with my kids, I could imagine nothing worse than ever ruining their love for something due to me being overbearing or taking it away from them. I was listening to a Roy Jones podcast with Joe Rogan, and he said effectively he knew he had to at one stage either pick from becoming a world champion or his dad, and he picked being a world champion, and he had to let go of his dad because he knew his dad was that person that would just come in and just take control and try and do it his way when he knew what he was trying to do and achieve. So for your parents to have that framework and give you guys that structure, that foundation, they're obviously, one, amazing parents, but they're obviously great coaches too, because that would be a really, really hard balance. I think
from the young age, they were really big on anything that we wanted, they'd support, but they wouldn't push it. So from probably like 14, I started the first time I went away, I went to France when I was 15, and we trained with the under 21 French national team. And at 15, I got bashed there. Like, it was 2 bad weeks. I came home and I was like, geez, I don't know if like this is ever going to be me. Like, and like I talked to mum and dad, and I was like, look, like how am I ever going to get to that? Like, how is that? Because at that age, it isn't achievable. You look at someone. If I crossed over to MMA and sparred with Volk tomorrow, that would go poorly for me, very badly. So it's like, how am I ever going to get there? And it's like, they were just like, well, you have to work for that. Like, you're younger, you're not experienced. And they said, you know, like these guys, I said to them, they train twice a day. Like, I only train once a day. And then as I said that, I'm like, oh, well, that's the answer. So then before school, I'd start training. And then, so they'd never wake you up, but they'd hold you accountable. They're like, oh, so did you train this morning? And there were some days where like, nah. And then they didn't have to say anything, but I just knew by like just saying nothing that it was like, well, that's not good enough. Like, so you learn yourself, and I'm really grateful that they didn't force that upon us from a young age, because we probably would hate them now. And it's just like the way it goes. And we see that all the time, and it's sad when you see some kids look at their dad and they're like, man, you're a piece of shit. It's like,
I think it's possible, but it's difficult. Like, you do have to actively manage it, because otherwise it ends up like you were saying with Roy Jones. Like, otherwise you just get to a point where it's like you have to choose one or the other. And I think it is possible, but like, it doesn't just happen naturally. Like, the more likely outcome is that you have a coach and you have a parent. But is that you have a coach and no parent anymore. Like, if that's what you want. Dad ends up listening to this though. We did train this morning. So
I can attest to that. You probably see some sweat beads coming from the boys still from the session. So that's sick.
So what's next, boys? What's on the horizon? What do you got coming up?
Yeah, so as Josh sort of touched on, we had 2 events cancelled on us, or one cancelled completely and one we couldn't get there because of the travel restrictions for Australia, which was difficult, because you can sort of see the Olympic qualification slipping a little bit when these guys are getting opportunities that we didn't. So we thought our year was done until like late February, and then about a week ago I was on the way to training, and Daniel called and said, I got a wild card to fight in the World Masters in Doha. So I fight on the 11th of January, which is like a really big opportunity qualification wise. Josh unfortunately didn't get that just because he'd had that surgery the year before, and he'd had about 6 months where he missed competition. So that's my next big one. I head there I think on the 5th or 6th of Jan. So I'll go to Melbourne 3rd or something, get all my COVID testing and stuff, make sure all that's good, and then get over and have a good go. So it'll be nearly a year since I fought last time, which is exciting talking about. And this has been fun too, to like have a tiny last little weekend away and a break, a mental break, I guess, from then starting to cut and get like really into serious camp. And then
so I think the first event scheduled like for the rest of the world tour is end of February. So I helped Nathan prepare, which will probably keep me in like better shape over Christmas than I probably would have been. So, and then there's a national camp early January, which I'll get down to Melbourne for, and then just miss out on this event, which is pretty shit. But I think having to wait a little bit longer and maybe having like a few less chances will like make me a little more motivated over that period.
It's funny how your perspective changes though. Like this year, if someone said to me in February, you can't go Byron, like with all the boys, late December and Christmas is pretty much off, and you can't do like all the Christmas parties and stuff coming up, like you won't touch food or drink or anything, I'd be like, nah, like that's not happening. And now I'm like, don't worry, not an issue. Like I'd make weight every weekend till the games if it meant like I'd be standing on the podium. So it's hopefully be an exciting year coming up.
Awesome.
I would love for these boys to leave us with something.
Yeah. Give us we usually end a lot of our podcasts with some words of wisdom, but you guys have probably got too many, so try and share one between the both of you. But is there anything you boys live by that has kept you going, got you to this point, and probably get you on that podium.
Anything you guys
any
say to
shortly?
each other before a comp or anything? Like,
I think like we've started, not like a motto, but like the thing we've started sort of like training and like pushing by a little bit. Like we sort of think of like whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Like it's something like I don't know if it's like a cheesy motto or whatever, but like it is just something that we actually believe in. Like whether it's coming back from injury or like time spent away or just like that shit session at 6 a.m. in your basement at home, like in the garage on the rower, like that's pretty shit.
Yeah.
Just like whatever it takes. Like if it's good, if it's bad, like yeah.
The only, I guess, one that I've sort of come with the last 18 months is like to actually be a bit nicer to yourself at the end of the day, because it is hard, no matter in any field, sport and what you guys do. Like when you're really, really good at something, it's hard because you always want to be better.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't always happen. You never always get exactly as good as you want to get. But at the end of the day, like you got to be a bit kinder to yourself, because there's plenty of people that are doing it tough and it goes down a pretty dark rabbit hole pretty quick if you get too hard on yourself.
100%. You got to celebrate your wins.
Awesome. Thanks, boys.
No, thanks.
It was awesome.
Glad you boys can make the trip up with the D train, and plenty more in the future. This will just be the start.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, boys.